Hello, YouTube, and welcome to the sound of Safe and Sound, Texas. It's going to be doing a little bit of a shootout today, talking about an album that I like very much from Cyndi Lauper called She's So Unusual. So I've had the OG of that for many years, and about a year or so ago, I got the Mobile Fidelity Sound Lab silver label version. So now these are a little bit different. They're not the usual original master recording name that they usually have on top. This says Mobile Fidelity Sound Lab. So it means a couple of things usually. It means that one, Mobile Fidelity is not really stating that they have the actual original master tape, the original of that. They could have a copy. They could have one that they're not able to ascertain, in fact, was the master. And so they don't call it original master recording in that regard. And they also press typically on 140 gram vinyl. So it's a little bit cheaper. These go for around 30 bucks. So we're going to do a bit of a discussion on a shootout. For those of you who might not be familiar with Cyndi Lauper, she really rose to fame with this album back in the 80s, and the actual date on this album here, although it's been obviously repressed, is 1983 is when it came out. This is a limited edition series album, and it has a number on it, but it's not limited to a certain number like a lot of the other ones. The One Steps and some of the other higher end LPs are limited to a certain quantity. I think they'd repressed this recently and came out with some more of these. So this album is, again, well known for a couple of hits that were big singles. One of them, Girls Just Want to Have Fun, probably the biggest. And it had a really funny video in it. And I'll show you a little bit about that in the video here, be showing you that. And then I'm going to also talk about the other two great hits on here, Time After Time and All Through the Night. So these are classics. Now, Cyndi Lauper, greatly titled album, She's So Unusual, because you can see on here, she's dressed in a very stylish costume, and she wears her hair a lot of different ways, and she's just kind of all around gal that really has a lot of fun. So it's very interesting that that was really, in fact, her biggest hit. And as you'll see in that video I mentioned, there's a lot of fun in that video. And basically, it was kind of an anthem for young ladies, girls just having fun in the 80s, and so it was a classic in that regard, and I think it remains a classic. So the shootout kind of is between that and then the OG or original press, which came out on a label called Portrait, which was a division of Epic, Sony, Columbia kind of grouping. And so this is the original album, which came out, and it's on Portrait. So we're going to talk about how that sounded. And then we're going to go to my most recent acquisition, thanks to Armando Cordoso of Second Chance Records, who is selling some Japanese presses. I've wanted a Japanese press of this for quite a few years. You'll see it has the original OB strip on here, which is a big kind of fashion statement for Japanese pressings to have these. And so we'll talk about that. That also is on the Portrait label. And so it's very interesting. So without any further ado, and I'm going to be having some videos on Mobile Fidelity, MOFI, MFSL, whatever they're called. I'm going to be doing some work on some videos for those for you, because I've been buying their products since the 80s when they first came out, and have quite a few of them. So I respect their product and their work greatly. But in this case, I would have to say that of the three that are up here, the Japanese versus the Mobile Fidelity here with the silver label, and then the original, Mobile Fidelity actually comes in third. and it comes in third for a couple of reasons. Although the vinyl is very quiet, which is a great attribute, of course, to have, the actual music and the sound is very thin, does not have very hard hitting drum kicks and bass. And it just really seems like it is very compressed. And you have to turn the volume up more on it, probably up a good 20% from the other pressings. And so the one thing I will say, in some ways, her voice clarity is slightly better on this, very slightly, but the loss of the musical elements of it are so profound that it doesn't make any difference. And the fact that her voice is probably more profound is because maybe those elements are so thin. So I would call the sound of this very thin and not very pleasing. It doesn't sound bad, but when you compare it to the others, then all of a sudden you realize it's just way too sterile. It just really doesn't give you the life and the animation that the other one has, especially on certain songs, because some of these are fairly high energy songs. Bebop, girls just want to have fun. Even the slower things, time after time, the drum kicks on that are very precise, and you don't feel them in your body when you're listening to it like you do with other presses. So the mobile fidelity, unfortunately, I would say it's $30. It's you get what you pay for, I guess. $30 version of this. I'd say I have a similar experience with the Cars Heartbeat City. It was a little bit disappointing. The Silver Label series, I think, are a compromise, kind of, and I think that you recognize that. So let's go now to the OG, to the original pressing. So, original pressings are usually kind of the best of the best. They when they came out, and it is very full of life. It is very punchy. The highs are good. The voices are good and strong. Um, the thing that this OG and many OGs suffer from, especially on US presses, is surface noise. It's not as evident in songs that are really fairly loud and fairly intense and moving, and you can't have any quiet passages there. You kind of just don't know it's there until you come to the in between the songs, in the lead-in grooves to each song, or at the toward the end of a song when it's fading, you start to recognize it more. So I would say the quality of the vinyl is impacted by that. And the 80s and the 70s, especially mid 70s on, weren't known for having the most pristine vinyl out there in U.S. pressings, at least. But for the actual sound of the record and the music and the expansiveness of it, basically you have a very wide dynamic range on it. The voices are very strong. The drum kicks and the bass are strong. The highs are crisp where they need to be. It does have a very good sound to it. So, if you see one of these in good condition for 20 or 25 bucks, let's say, a really good VG Plus one or better versus the Mobile Fidelity, you're going to get a better impression of what the sound should really be like with this. If any surface noise at all bugs you, then probably you won't like the OG as much. And I have two different OGs from different pressing plants, by the way, and they both suffer from the same issue, and it's about the vinyl. So we come finally to the Japanese pressing. Okay, so the Japanese pressing here, this looks like it was done based on the color of the OB. It was done in 83, 84 when it first came out, and looking at the dead wax. So what we have here is a typical Japanese pressing. The surface noise is much lower than the U.S. Not quite as good as the MOFI. I mean, it's close. I mean, it's close enough to really not matter as much. But so I'd say the vinyl is definitely on the quiet side, and the actual music really jumps on this thing. really jumps. I mean, um, I was a little bit surprised because I had heard a rating from someone else that they thought this was maybe a 7 out of 10. And I'm not sure if that comparison was to the OG or what, but I would call it closer to a 8.5 to a 9 in terms out of 10 because it really has a lot. And I played these certain pieces of each song that I really know well, back to back to back, very quickly to be able to come to some conclusions. Okay, so there is on the song All Through the Night, there is in the last minute, minute and a half, there's some really strong vocals by Cyndi and a where she holds a note for quite a few seconds. By the way, she's an operatic trained singer. I mean, she's the real deal. So she can do it. She's got the pipes and she's got the experience and the training to do that. So she don't let her looks fool you. She's very, very well talented in this regard. But she holds this note, and all I can say is on this pressing, when I was standing there and that note hung and transcended, it had an emotional impact to me. And I heard it after I'd listened to the Mobile Fidelity and before I listened to the OG on this song and on this particular piece, because it's a very well engineered, well mastered song. And I really wanted to pick out some of the instruments, some of the chorus that goes with her, and then her voice hanging in the air, kind of. And the thing is that her voice came out at me and into me more than it did on the OG. On the OG, it was strong, but it was a little more muddled with the instruments. It wasn't quite as segregated. And I literally felt almost an emotional experience when I heard that and, that note being held. And really, it was really kind of intense in a way. And so this is where, we get into this discussion about Japanese pressings. With really good mixes and engineering and something that isn't really dependent on raw bass kind of metal kind of stuff. Japanese can do well on engineering in a way and mastering in a way that brings that out. Okay, when it's not sustained. When it's sustained, then I think that's where they tend to back off more. I've finally come to core a little more of finite conclusion about the way they engineer based on what I've listened to. And I think this album is a great example. Just certain things like time after time with the kick drum in the beginning. I mean, you get it, you feel it, right? You feel it even equally to what you do on the OG. So for vinyl quietness and sound, I think I've got to give the nod to the Japanese version in this case. I really think it is immaculate in terms of noise, and it is pronounced in terms of quality of reproduction as it relates to the mastering and the engineering. So that's a shootout. It's one that I wasn't sure how was going to end up. I would say that although I'm not as surprised about the Japanese pressing sounding good compared to the OG, I am surprised about how far below the Mobile Fidelity sound in terms of it. Now, I will say this. If you're a person who likes that album or likes those songs, but doesn't really like the beat or the real, feeling of it, maybe the Mobile Fidelity would work for you better. It's a little clearer. Maybe it's a little better type headphone experience. But as it relates to, impact, listening to it and standing there, it was just really thin, and that's unfortunate because I think people have come to expect a certain level from Mobile Fidelity, and calling it a silver label, I'm not sure people quite recognize what the gap might be. Although you're not paying as much, so I guess they might want to make that calculation when they think about it. So anyway, that's what I have. Remember to subscribe and to comment and to like this video if you did. It's again one of my favorite albums and has some great tunes on it that are ones that I could listen to over and over again. And really, when you listen to it, listen to the engineering, listen to her voice. Her voice is, I think a lot of people miss her voice in the sense that she was so outlandish in terms of her appearance and all, and kind of say a little ditzy, but she's very, very smart. But she kind of had that, and so I think a lot of people dismissed her to some degree. But her voice is just really unbelievable, and I give her a lot of credit. She's been very successful in her life. You know, she's been married to the same guy for 30 years, Dave Walper. I mean, she's a great lady, and I really think this is a real tribute to her. And again, now I've given you my input on it. Let me know what you think. If you have a different opinion or you've tried these and you have questions or whatever, let me know. Thanks for listening to the Sound of Safe and Sound Texas. We'll see you next time.